Good afternoon, good morning, everybody, or good evening, wherever you are. Welcome to the last course, Entrepreneurship for Scientists. This is the last course in the GARD Academy for the 2022 GARD Forum. I would like to start my presentation. And as you have seen in the previous slides with the speakers, we have already covered nanotechnology, R programming, biosensors a few minutes ago, and now we're going into the entrepreneurship for scientists. So let's start this course. I have a poll questions. What is your purpose of attending this course? Do you have an existing technology that you want to bring to market? Are you planning to become an entrepreneur, or are you beginning in your technology? So I hope the polls are there, but anyway, we will continue on that and we will just bring that in whenever that is available. All right, there are 4 components or factors of an entrepreneurship. Firstly, of course, is the entrepreneur, which is the person. Second is the technology, market needs, and capital. But for this presentation, I will not be covering market needs and capital. I will focus my time on the entrepreneur and the technology. So the focus of my presentation will be entrepreneurship for scientists. So I will cover scientist entrepreneur, their characteristics, and then I will go into innovative technology creation, which will involve or cover innovation techniques, and then de-risking strategies. Entrepreneurship is a very highly risky endeavor. So we will look at strategies on how to de-risk your technology. So let's look at the scientist entrepreneur. Now, many of us would like, especially for scientists, assuming these are mostly scientists in this group, not many scientists become entrepreneurs, much as we would like to be. But there is no reason why a creative scientist should not be an entrepreneur. So we have studies and we have stories and we have documentations of many scientists who have become successful entrepreneurs. So what's the difference between an entrepreneur and an entrepreneurship? Now, entrepreneurship is the creation or extraction of value. So whatever you have, you want to make that valuable to society, to a certain group of people, to your market needs. The entrepreneur is that person that translates that invention or technologies into valuable products and services. So this is my aha moment. This is my story. As you know, I work on nano biosensors, and I have been saying our nano biosensors that we work on are designed to save lives. And we have been saying that. We have publications on that and so on. But it didn't really occur to me until someone came to the lab and said, your biosensor will never save a life if it stays in your lab. And that really triggered my thinking process. And that started my being an entrepreneur. So our technologies will never accomplish anything that we are designed it to be if they stay in our labs, if they are not converted to valuable products. So what are the characteristics of a scientist entrepreneurs? They are creative. They have a vision for success. They are risk takers. They view change as an opportunity. They are the people who can hire the best and fire the rest. They are team players. They are focused, they're business oriented, and they have interpersonal skills. I have a story about this hire the best, fire the rest. I was in an entrepreneurial training or academy one time. And my mentor said, well, you have to have the skill of hiring the best and firing the rest. And I said, I don't know how to do that. I'm not that kind of person. Then this mentor said, then get a partner who would do that. Basically, hire the best, fire the rest. So I would like to cover, I cannot cover all these characteristics today, of course, but I like to cover on what it means to be focused, what it means to be creative, and what it means to be a risk taker. So focus, dream big, but focus small. You need to quickly, from dreaming big, you need to quickly move to focus. You don't have the time to be wandering around. Focus leads to discipline and staying on course. You will have a lot of struggles along the way. You will be distracted. You will have so many requests, and you need to stay focused on what you want. And the one way to identify that is to identify your passion. Where is your passion? That passion will lead you to focus, and that will lead you to being distracted. With focus, your entrepreneurial energy is also efficiently exerted. Since there are so many things to do, you don't want to waste your time. You don't want to waste your energy. You want to achieve your objective as soon as possible. When you are not focused, potential customers would also notice that. They get confused, like exactly what you're trying to achieve. And then, because you have so many things to do, because of lack of focus, then your energy gets into an average output. It lacks competitive advantage. So now we go into creativity versus innovation. What's the difference between creativity and innovation? Well, creativity is conceiving something original or unusual. There are many, many creative people. But creativity, if it stays just being creative, it doesn't lead to innovation. So creativity does not always lead to innovation. Creativity is just conceiving something original, something unusual, something nice, something novel. But when you translate that into something practical, a reality, something useful to society, something that somebody can benefit with that becomes innovation. Now, both creativity and innovation are necessary in entrepreneurship. You need to be creative because you need to develop something novel, but you also need to translate it into practical reality. Now, there are obstacles to creativity. One of them is having the wrong problem. So if you are looking at the wrong problem, you will not get to a novel technology. Or you have a wrong definition of the problem. This is very common. We see a problem, but we don't take the time to really define what the problem is. We assume that we know the problem, but actually we may not. So we really need to dig into, talk to people who are near to the problem and see if your definition of the problem is the same as their definition of the problem. Or also whether it is in fact a problem. Because sometimes we may think it's a problem, but actually it's not a problem. Or there is a problem, but it's a problem that cannot be solved. So you have to really differentiate between those. Insufficient understanding of the problem can lead you nowhere. And also wrong problem definition can lead you to wrong direction. The other obstacle to creativity is lack of knowledge. You need to understand the technical side of the problem. Disciplinary knowledge is very important. Or if you don't have any tools or methods of accessing the knowledge, that's also a problem. So lack of knowledge and lack of tools would prevent you from being creative and innovative. The other way, the third way is avoiding conflict, or you're avoiding contradiction. You have that personality where you easily compromise, or you don't conceive the problem as impossible to overcome. That puts that person, the scientist, into an area where that person would have difficulty being entrepreneur. So scientists, entrepreneurs welcome problems. They do not conceive problem as hard to overcome. And then finally, another obstacle to creativity is psychological inertia. We call this the psychological inertia is just the way you do things, or the customary ways of doing things. And so you are not able to get out of that conventionality. And so it's very difficult to become an entrepreneur if you are used to this customary or conventional way. So we have described at least 4 obstacles of creativity. So let's now go to innovative technology creation. How do you create technology that is innovative, that has practical value, that is useful to society? So let's dive into that. Now, creativity and innovation actually can be taught. Sometimes we say, well, I don't have the creative mind, or I don't have the innovative mind. No, everybody can learn innovation. One technique is to look at patterns or observing outside field. We have seen, and somebody made an article about this and developed methodologies on this that shows that problems and solutions are repeated across industries and sciences. And patterns of technical evolution are also repeated across industries and sciences. And finally, creative innovations use scientific effects outside the field where they were developed. So if you have that innovative mind, you can train your mind to look at patterns and scientific effects outside your field. I will give you an example. Many times we have a problem, or when we are in the food supply chain or food system, we see problem in the food supply chain. And we scratch our head and like, how do I solve this? Well, you know what? This is an example that you can look out to the other field. If you look at the automotive industry or even the airline industry, their supply chain is very robust. They have worked on the supply chain for a long time. That's why because that's part of their business operation for profitability. So look at them, look at the automotive industry, look at other industries to see what is the supply chain, what are they doing, and what can you learn from their supply chain, and what can you learn from their successes. Now, you move that into the food supply chain and you say, what can I tweak from the automotive industry supply chain that I can use and I can learn for solving my problems in the food supply chain? So that's one way of developing innovation. Another way of innovation technique is to resolve contradiction. Now, what is technical contradiction? Technical contradiction is defined as when a desired state cannot be reached because something else in that state, the system prevents it. In other words, when something gets better, something else automatically gets worse. That's what we call technical contradiction. Here's an example. A dairy farm operators could no longer use dried cow manure for fertilizer, which is good, due to an increased cost of energy, which is bad. So there is a contradiction. You want to use what is good, but in the process, something gets worse, the cost of energy. Now, if you can resolve this technical contradiction, that will lead you to innovation. In other words, a solution to this would be good and also good, not bad. So in other words, the solution will be good and not bad. So once you're in that position, that is a resolution of the technical contradiction, and that leads to innovation. Here are more examples of technical contradiction. For example, the first one, product is strong, which is good, but the weight is increased, which is bad, right? Or training is comprehensive, which is good, but it keeps employees away from their assignments, which is bad. Coffee should be hot to be enjoyed, good, but cool to avoid being burned. So that's a contradiction. Service is customized to each customer, which is what we want. But the service delivery becomes complicated, which is bad. Software should be complex to have many features, but simple to be easy to learn. So you see these contradictions? Now, if you can find solutions to these contradictions, in other words, technologies that will solve these contradictions, that will resolve these contradictions, you have an innovative technology. The other technique for innovation is resolving physical contradiction. And physical contradiction is defined as that when a situation in which an object or system suffers contradictory, opposite requirements. For example, training should take a long time to be thorough, but not take any time from work. Now, that's a physical contradiction. If you can develop a training system that will solve this contradiction, now you have an innovative technology. The other technique for innovation is ideality audit. So the ideality audit is defined as you maximize your benefit, you minimize your cost, and you minimize your harm. So benefits over cost plus harm, where you maximize your benefit and you minimize your costs and harms. One way to do that is to look at the system you have and the system you want. And in between is this technical gap. So you have what you have. You can look at the COVID-19 tests and you address what you want. And the gap here, if you can solve the gap, that is also an innovation. Here's an example of an ideality audit. You say you have your ideality, these are your primary benefits and other benefits and so on, acceptable cost, acceptable harm, and acceptable cost and acceptable harm. And you want the system desired, and you compare that with your current system. So for example, diagnostic before patient becomes symptomatic. We want that, right? Even now, before this patient is symptomatic, what is available? Tests that can show symptoms or detect COVID-19 when the patient is symptomatic. So now you have a gap. You want to develop a technology that can detect both symptomatic and asymptomatic. If you can find that technology, you have an innovation. And so on, you can get this list, even with a cost. Say you have a current system that is $20 on the cost. And you can develop a test that is only $3 or $5. That is innovation, because now you can mass produce that and make money. So by identifying your system that you desired and you're assessing what's current, the gap, the ideal gap, could lead you to innovation. And then there's the other one. We call that the ideal final result. So the ideal final result is also related to ideality, where you want to maximize your benefit and minimize your harm. And the ideal final result is to basically start from by practically the impossible. You identify your ideal system. What is an ideal system? If you have a problem and you say the ideal system would be that the problem solves itself. So basically, your ideal problem would not require any cost, zero cost, will not have any harm because it's already there. And sorry for that. And you don't also have any other incidental distractions. And then you maximize your benefit. Well, because this problem solved itself, the benefit is there. So you start from there and you try to bring down the cost and look at the cost and harm from a minimum perspective. When you are able to do that, you have that would lead you a beginning to an innovative solution. So here's an example of an ideal final result. Engine, you want an engine with increased acceleration capacity and decreased fuel consumption. It's contradictory, right? Because the increased acceleration requires high fuel consumption. That is the state now. So now, if you can find a technology that will increase acceleration capacity without increasing fuel cost, fuel consumption, you have an innovation. You have that will lead to your innovation, innovative technology. So now you have the technology. Then you move to like, how can I de-risk my strategies? If you may not be aware that entrepreneurship is a high risk endeavor. Based on current statistics, only 10% succeed. That means out of 100, 90 will fail, 10 will succeed. So how do you minimize your risk for failure? You can do that by de-risking. In other words, try to minimize or remove the risk. We call that de-risking strategies. This is the valley of death. The valley of death is when you have your invention at the beginning in your research lab and you bring it up to the market. Now, you have a dip into the benefit because you're struggling to make it work over time, but eventually you come out into the other side of the valley, profitable or useful. Between the invention and the market is a gap. We call this valley, and we call this the valley of death. So what we want is to narrow this distance, minimize this distance, and minimize the depth. So how do you de-risk? By shortening or narrowing the valley of death. You want to make sure that that distance is narrow and short. So in NASA, in the NASA's technology readiness level, they established this way of assessing the maturity of technologies to guide the scientists and to guide everybody else that they are dealing with into moving their technology towards maturity. So in other words, make that valley of death as narrow as possible. It was developed by NASA in 1970s. There's a scale 1 to 9, 1 being the initiation stage and 9 the most mature stage. And in 2000, the US Department of Defense adopted this, and in 2008, Europe adopted this. Now, NIH has a similar technology readiness level for diagnostics. And I'll just go through these steps here so that you have an idea what this looks like. The technology readiness level 1 is review of scientific knowledge. So in other words, it's a review of literature. Basically, you're thinking about it. You're looking at the literature, whether it's feasible, whether there is something, a need of this kind of problem, and so on, a need of this kind of solution, or need of this kind of technology. So you are kind of like a literature review. just basically initiating it. Then technology readiness level 2, you start developing the hypothesis. Now you're starting to make some experiments. The TRL level 3 is identifying characterization of product and identifying your experiments. For TRL4, you're trying to optimize. You're demonstrating now the safety and efficacy of your technology. TRL5, now you're advancing your product into moving initiation to manufacturing, like you're looking at scale up. TRL6, you start looking at clinical trial, if it is a diagnostic for health, and also looking at regulatory guidelines. TRL7 is when you start scaling up. And if it is a diagnostic for clinical, for human diagnostics, you go into phase 2 clinical trials. And finally, TRL8, you are going into phase 3 clinical trials. You're basically almost done with your evaluation of your technology. So let's look at these stages, 1 and 2. As I said, the milestones in 1 is just a review of scientific knowledge. You have a review of literature. Basically, you're saying, yes, there is a need for this type of technology. TRL2, you start having your hypothesis and you start your experimental designs and experimentation. I suggest that at this stage, you bring in the customer's voice early to inform your design. So in other words, you bring in potential customers. What would they think? What are their views? What are their perspectives of your technology? Are they welcoming it? Do they like it? How can they participate in the design? So basically, you want as early as possible, you want to develop a customer responsive technology. You bring the customers together with your design process. There are different types of customer requirements. Customers want function. Many may be like physical requirements of the product. Products decide behavior. Customers want comfort and aesthetics, the human factors. Is it pretty? Is it colorful? Is it simple? Is it easy to use? Can I put it in my pocket? Can I use it at home? I mean, all those human factors, you want to bring them as soon as possible. And then resources. What are the manufacturing requirements? What are the sales requirements? What's the life cycle concerns? Because you don't want to develop a technology where when you are done and you feel so excited about it, there's actually no supply chain. Like there are actually no supplies. So you don't want to be in that stage. Now, there are different kinds of customers. We tend to look at end user as the customer, but regulatory bodies are just as important customers. They could put your technology, you could stop your technology. Retailers, how are they going to process or display this product? Vendors, how are they going to assemble these products? What are their service requirements? Marketing and sales, how are these products to be marketed? And manufacturing, how are these products going to be manufactured? These are very basic, but yet many times we miss these points. That's why you have to bring the customer's voice as soon as possible, even as early as TRL2. For example, here's a customer's perspective. Customer, just like us, product wants to work. It should work. It would last long. It's easy to maintain. It looks attractive. It incorporates latest technology. It has many features. That's what customers prefer, the users. But then the manufacturing has a different perspective. Are the parts easy to produce? What are the resources required? Are they available? Are they available in the country? Do they need to import this? What are the standards? What are the methods? What's the waste? Are there waste that they are not even allowed to handle? Radioactive waste, something like that. Manufacturing have different perspective. The marketing sales have different perspective. How will this meet customer requirements? How is it packaged? How is it stored? How is it transported? Is it easy for display? That's the marketing perspective. So now you have finished TRL2. We move to TRL3. TRL3 is when you start identifying or validating sensitivity and specificity based on appropriate matrices. TRL4, you want the sample volume assay components already optimized by this time. So now at this stage, you're starting to move into TRL5. You're starting to look at acceptability, preliminary regulatory guidelines, and impact on manufacturing, supply chain. Do you have even supplies to make these components? So that is TRL5. So by this time, you will now look at patentability of the technology. Is the technology novel? There are 3 requirements for patentability: novelty, non-obviousness, and usefulness. So the question is the technology novel? Has it not been seen before? Is it new? Is the technology non-obvious? What is already known, and why should this be new? And is the technology useful? Will someone want to use it? At this time, you also want to check marketability. Is there a market potential? What are your competing technologies? What is the potential market share? Is it the whole world, or it's just your country, or it's just your neighbor? Those are all your marketability assessment. Is the return on investment enough for someone to invest their money? Who will be the customers? And why would the customers buy this over the other technologies? And many more market and investment questions. You want now to check robustness. Is the technology robust, reproducible, reliable, valid? Is the technology sensitive enough? Is it specific enough? Has there been enough validation studies to show that it is reliable and robust? This is the stage to look at those robustness. And then you want to look at ownership. Who will be the owner of this technology? At Michigan State University and most universities, the university owns our technology. So every technology that I have generated in the lab is owned by the university. So is that the same? You want to check that out because it is expensive to file a patent. Who will pay? And if university will not pay for the patent application, who will pay for it? So those are things that you have to be talking to the university. Who will be the owner, the ownership of this? So now we're moving to TRL6, which is now into trying to apply for regulatory approval. TRL7, you are now into scale up and phase 2 trial. And TRL8, you are now in phase 3, and you are now seeking approval in the United States FDA or in your country, an approving government or approving unit. So you are moving in this stage. So this is now, you have to be checking your manufacturability. Do you have the supply chain? How much money is required to make this work? Is the production cost low enough that you can make profit? Who will license the technology? What are the upcoming technologies that would provide the same or even better service? Will there be enough time? As you are moving the time towards commercialization, will there be no new technology that will come up in the market that will dislodge your competitive edge? These are all questions at this stage. Regulatory requirements. What are the regulatory requirements, safety requirements, and so on? Now, you have to check for challenges to intellectual property. You may have the IP, you may have the innovation, but there are existing patents that are held by others that will prevent you, or which are dominant, that are existing, or there is no freedom to operate. In other words, you have the technology, but you cannot implemented. Or the invention is not patentable, it's not protectable, or the patent cannot be enforced. So those are areas that because you don't want to proceed and then just come up in this hurdles. So by this time also you want to explore your financing. You have the seed in the US, they call that the seed fund. Startup fund is the second part. Second round, mezzanine round. Then you have your initial public offering and secondary offering. These are the terms in the financing world. And you want your money, you want someone to pay for your, as you move your technology to commercialization stage, because it requires a lot of money. So my second polling question is, whatever is your technology, what TRL is it? And did this course help you move towards entrepreneurship? So I summarize, I presented to you techniques on entrepreneurship for scientists, scientist characteristics, innovation technology creation, innovation techniques, and de-risking using the technology readiness levels. Thank you for your time, and I'm ready for your question. Question. Polls are open and the biosensor course ended. Okay. Question here. Are you aware of innovation pathways that will not lead to the dominant capitalistic entrepreneurship model of maximizing profits versus actually solving the intended problem? Yes. And these are what we call nonprofits. So you can develop your technology and make it into a nonprofit. Any other question? Please write your question in the Q&A. No question? So the next question here is, do you have recommendations for someone that is not sure how to connect with stakeholders? That is, the question is, how to connect, or you don't want to connect. So if you want to connect to stakeholders, you really have to meet them. You have to be able to basically present your passion of why the technology, why the problem is important, and why your technology is the solution. The other question is it possible to guarantee that the technology is open access even with a patent? Yes, you can work with the university and you can say that you have the patent, but you want it basically from your side. You don't want to make money out of it. The university will understand it because they will provide, they will discuss with you, they will meet with you into areas of mutual benefit to you and the university. For example, I have always expressed that my technology, the nanoparticle technology, will be free to addressing diagnostic needs of communities who are poor, who don't have, or who need the most, but can afford the least. And the university understands that. So they know that it can be used for food safety as well. So they are working with a food company that they are working to license our technology with the idea that if it is for tuberculosis, that it should be free. So, you know, the university is very kind. They They will work with you in making sure that it satisfies your personal passion, it satisfies your personal interest, because you are the inventor and you are the one who discovered the technology. They will work with you on that. Any other question?
Yes, there's a few in the chat to you.
So there's another person. Are there organizations who would actually do a dry run when we just have a proof of concept? Yes. There are many, many organizations at the state level, even I think at the city level, state level, and government level in the United States. At least that's what I know. So there are what we call entrepreneurship groups, even at MSU, who would do a dry run when you have a proof of concept. You just contact them. Like I was trained to make an assessment by a unit at the state level. So they taught me how to do a technology assessment. So I sat with them. They spent about maybe 6 hours, 6 to 8 hours with me in teaching me how to do technology assessment. The university paid for my training. I was immersed in an entrepreneurial training academy for a week, and the university paid for that. Yeah, there are plenty of help if you are interested, because the economy, the US economy, and any economy for that matter, depends on entrepreneurs. So they want to develop as many entrepreneurs as possible. They want scientists to become entrepreneurs as much as possible, because the economy is built on entrepreneurship, on business. So another question, do you see a role for GARD in developing and or distributing rapid diagnostics beyond information exchange? Yes, of course. That is where we are. I have been doing work with many countries, with many collaborators in the Philippines, Mexico, Peru, Nepal, India, and many other places through material transfer agreement, basically exchanging, giving them free access to the technology with the idea that they would be able to use it for their own problem. And so they design their own problem. And that's what we do. So following on nonprofit that is not a single individual. Yes, you can form a group. You can form a group, a nonprofit group. You just have to work with the university, and the university is very supportive if that is the expressed interest of the inventor. Like in my case, they know, MSU knows that I don't want to make money. I want to help poor people, and they understand that. And they are working with me to satisfy my passion, so express interest. They are working with me on that. Another one is, what are your thoughts on gaining and retaining focus, given that it's vital? What are your thoughts on gaining and retaining focus? Okay, so is the question related like how to maintain focus? Is that what the question is about? Okay, so let's assume that that's what it is about. How do you retain focus? You retain focus by being passionate and defining the problem. So for example, I'll give you my example. You have seen me, I have said always that rapid diagnostics for infectious and antimicrobial resistant pathogen. When I say that, that means I have eliminated non-infectious diseases. I consciously eliminate that because I want to focus on the infectious diseases. So some people came to me and said, how about developing a biosensor for cancer detection? My response is, that's not my focus. My focus is infectious diseases. I know it is important, but there are many people who are working on that, and I want to stay focused on infectious diseases. And some people say, what about if I want to detect this? I was like, you can use my technology, but I don't have time to get involved with that because that's not my focus. So you have to basically define your focus, your passion very early on in the technology development because it builds up as you move along. You don't want to waste your time or energy for something that's not within your, passion. That's why earlier I said you have to provide focus as part of entrepreneurship mindset. Now, the next question is, yes, it is vital. Focus, I cannot overemphasize focus. I always say focus, 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 focus. I cannot overemphasize focus. To bring a technology from the lab to commercialization, do we necessarily need to establish collaboration with companies? Well, it all depends. If you want the companies to fund it, yes, you need to talk to companies. If there are other nonprofits or funding agencies that will bring your product to commercialization, you can work with them. Companies is the most stable way of bringing your technology to the market because they have their own supply chain. They have already established their own supply chain. They already have a market. They already have a system of distributing this to retailers or vendors or people who would sell this, marketing or sales. They already have that in their system. You don't have to start all over. It's not very easy to start from scratch and then do a company. That's why startup companies are called startups, because they know that about 5 years, they will sell that company to their startup company to a bigger company. Startup companies do not go all the way to full companies. That rarely happens. Startup companies plan to sell their companies in 5 years to a bigger company because those bigger companies have the capacity and the infrastructure to distribute and manufacture your technology. Sometimes getting funding at the incubation time is difficult for young researchers. How can they be helped? There's plenty of help at the university level. There's help at the state level and at the federal level, at least in the United States that I know. So if you are a young researcher, reach out. You can tell them you want to be an entrepreneur, you want to be trained as an entrepreneur, you have technologies in your mind that is helpful to society. And so you can reach out. But at the beginning, you really have to know what it is that you want to deliver to society, because those groups that are also wanting to help are also busy. So they want also to make sure that their time is worth investing into people who really, firstly, understand the problem and understand the potential solution. If you are not focused and if you are confused yourself, that is a hard sell. You really have to focus and you really have to basically understand what you want. So for example, as I said, I kept telling everybody I'm developing nanobiosensors for infectious and antimicrobial diseases, period. That's what I do. And so I don't say, oh, and also cancer, and oh, also diabetes, and oh, also that. Your customer or your people you're helping will get confused, because when they start bringing the technology to the market, they need to identify who will be the potential buyers, who will be the potential customers. And you cannot be jumping all over, because that will be hard for them to even guide you what the price point is, what the behavior is of your customers. So though you have really to understand that. Any other question? How does patents work across countries? Very good question. If I own something with an American patent, does that apply everywhere? Unfortunately, no. Patent approved in the US can only be practiced in the US. Patents approved in the Philippines can only be practiced in the Philippines, except if at the very beginning, you say, I want this patent to be applicable throughout the world. Now, there's 192 or 98 countries in the world. I forgot now how many countries, 192, something like that. It is very expensive to even get a patent in the US. Now, if you add more countries, you can just imagine how expensive that becomes. So you have to identify, you say, well, I want it in the US and in the Philippines. Now, if you have coverage of US and the Philippines, then you can practice your patent in the US and in the Philippines. But you have to, that's not available, or you cannot impose that on another country. So there is a balancing act, like how many countries and which country do you think you would want to cover your patent? But remember, it is costly. The other question, 195 countries. Yes, thank you. There's 195 countries. So 195, even if you just spend like 10,000 per, that's a lot of money. And no university would probably be willing to pay. How can we develop trust among collaborators for sharing technology and not just results and statistics? This is where you need to be very careful who you're collaborating with. Social capital is very important. Friendship is very important. And as you said, trust. Trust is very important. You just have to trust that they will not turn around and basically betray you in any way. That is very important. So, any other question? They would like a link to my PPT. Sure, of course. I think the GARD will, I'll link that to a PDF. Any other question? Has this been helpful? Just put in the chat, has this lecture been helpful to you? Thank you, Susan. In helping you become an entrepreneur, I would encourage everybody listening here to become an entrepreneur. It's fun. It's challenging, but it's fun. But be ready for all the obstacles and the ups and downs in the valley of death. But you will come out well. Anything else? Okay. All right. So Chelsea, you can take it over.
Sure. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for our last short course. This was very insightful. I see the comments too, so I'm glad that you all enjoyed it. So in 7 minutes, we will have our closing ceremony, and you will find out the winners of the awards for the posters and pre-recorded talks, the winners for the Innovation Challenge, and the winners for the engagement on the Whova platform. And we will also be having a virtual meetup on March 9th. So that'll be at 9 a.m. Eastern. You can go to community, then on virtual meetups, and you can join us over there. If you're interested in future leadership positions and helping us plan for GARD 2023, which will be next year, March 10th through 11th, please reach out to me if you can't make it to the meeting in about 2 weeks from now. So thank you so much, Dr. Alocilja, for this wonderful presentation. Entrepreneurship for scientists is very important. Whenever you create something, you still need to make sure that you connect it with the community. We need to share our technologies and our knowledge with the world, with the public, and with other researchers. And I'm very happy with the turnout for over this weekend and all of your encouragement and your comments. I've seen them all, and thank you so much. So we have 5 minutes until the closing ceremony. You can view this recording online in about a day. We have all the other recordings that should already be up, but if you need anything, just reach out. And Dr. Alocilja, would you like to say anything else before we go?
Yeah, so we would like to know if they would like to get more courses like this in the next session in 2023. Because as you can see, the topic is like very superficial, but your question will dive into the real issue. So I would be glad to hold a similar session like this, just to tell you, like, I have so many, by God's grace, I have so many experiences with technology from the bench all the way to startup and something like that. I can share that with you. I have been trained as a scientist. I have been trained as an entrepreneur. So I can definitely share my experiences with you if you are interested to even have some kind of a coffee table or a coffee discussion. So for those of you who have attended this class, you probably have an idea already, but also I can offer the same class for those who have not attended. And then we can just sort of develop communities, small group communities within GARD to discuss, like, how do I move this forward, or how do I handle this, or how just kind of things like that. I think it will be fun.
Yes, people are writing in the chat, and we also have on our community board for you all to write what free short course topics would you like in the future. So we've been seeing things like people want to know how to write winning fundable proposals on Python programming, buyer monetization, things like that. And we have a survey that actually should be out, or will be out in an hour, where you all can tell us and you can message us, because we very much want your input. I see some people are saying that they would even like a course every month or two, which would be a lot of fun. So thank you so much, everyone. I am going to end this session for us to prepare for our next session. And thank you again. See you soon.
Thank you again for everybody. Have fun. I wish you well in your entrepreneurship endeavor. Tell me if you have already built a company.